It happened in a single moment, one vote, one decision, and a truth that millions of people have been waiting years to see was pushed back into the shadows. And the most chilling part? The people who blocked it knew exactly what they were protecting. There's a reason the nation froze the instant the results appeared. A reason survivors felt their stomachs drop. A reason journalists and investigators looked at each other like they just watched history fold in the wrong direction. Because this wasn't just a legislative fight. This was a once-in-a-generation chance to expose one of the darkest networks in modern memory. And the door was slammed shut.
Carved into the facade of the U.S. Supreme Court, the 4 words, equal justice under law. Equal justice under law. What does that mean to us who grow up in America? It means that nobody is above the law. Not a politician, not a celebrity, not a billionaire, no one. Now, we certainly know that this vision to which we aspire, equal justice under the law, has not been fully accomplished. But we wrestle to move closer to that vision, to realize that vision. And today, we had a chance as the U.S. Senate to move significant stride in the direction of saying no one is above the law. The legislation that was considered was an amendment form of a proposal that I had drafted to say, release the Epstein files. And my co-pilot, Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, saying, release the Epstein files. And indeed, many members on both sides have believed in this vision of transparency and accountability. Why? Well, because they value those words that are carved above the pillars of the Supreme Court, equal justice and law. They cherish that value in their heart, that we aspire towards a vision where everyone is accountable. Plus, in this particular case involving Jeffrey Epstein, every single one of us, all 100 senators, know that Jeffrey Epstein was a monster who groomed and abused underage children, a monster who trafficked girls to rich and powerful men, a monster who destroyed the lives of hundreds of young women. As I speak, the U.S. Department of Justice has files detailing the names of those connected to Mr. Jeffrey Epstein. It's been widely reported that in May, our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, informed President Trump that his name appears in the Epstein files. But to be clear, just because a name is listed in the Epstein files doesn't mean that that person was a collaborator in abusing young women. There may be lots of names in that file related to just casual acquaintances or people met on trips, who knows? But some of those names in that file may well shine light on people who abused young women. So let's bring it to light. If we believe in that vision of equal justice under law, if we believe in accountability for all, then release the files. Let the chips fall where they may. It is the right thing to do. Everyone involved in assisting Jeffrey Epstein in running an international trafficking organization or involved in directly purchasing access to young women through Jeffrey Epstein or directly abusing young women proffered by Jeffrey Epstein, every single person, let the chips fall where they may. No matter how rich the person is, no matter if they held office in the past, no matter if they aspire to office in the future or sit in office right now, no matter how famous or not famous they might be. Let the chips fall where they may. That's the vision of equal justice under the law. Everyone involved in Mr. Epstein's crimes must be brought to light and must be held accountable. My colleague from Oregon, Senator Ron Wyden, and the Senate Finance Committee have been investigating Mr. Epstein's financial network for the last 3 years. The Biden administration fully cooperated with the Senate investigators on that case. The Finance Committee staff went to the Treasury Department to see the Epstein files and suspicious activity reports. Democrats understood that this was an ongoing investigation. We applauded the Biden administration for cooperating, and that was the right course. But now we're under a different administration. Instead of cooperating, the Trump administration is obstructing. The Trump administration and Attorney General Bondi are refusing to cooperate, and they are refusing to investigate further. They're simply saying 2 words: case closed. Case closed? When they have their hands on information potentially regarding dozens or hundreds of individuals who abused young women. So today we had a chance to vote on whether the case is closed. We had before us an amendment which said, deliver the files. Create the force of law, deliver the files. And 51 senators in this body, I am ashamed to say, said, hell no. We want them kept secret. We want to protect the perpetrators. Why? Because the man in the Oval Office, Mr. Trump, told us he wants us to protect those files, does not want them public. On July 17th, the Wall Street Journal reported on a letter allegedly written by Trump to Epstein as part of a birthday book for his 50th birthday in 2003. The letter is signed at the bottom, Donald. It features a drawing of a woman's body with very suggestive text. I debated putting that letter up. There's a chart of it in the door behind me, but it's already been made public. The public has seen it. I find it profoundly offensive letter. And as I passed by a stack of newspapers today, I saw a series of examples of Donald Trump's signature because Trump has said to the world, it's not my signature.
Imagine standing at the base of the Supreme Court, looking up at the words carved into stone, equal justice under law. That promise is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to tell every citizen that no one, no actor, no mogul, no politician, no billionaire is beyond accountability. But when a certain vote came to the Senate floor, that promise was tested in real time. And what unfolded told a very different story than the one carved in marble. Minutes before the vote, one senator was literally sprinting up the steps toward the chamber, knowing the stakes. Knowing that what was about to happen could shift how the country views justice, power, and the lengths people will go to keep certain names from ever seeing daylight. The conversation wasn't theoretical. It wasn't symbolic. It was about whether the public had the right to see the most tightly guarded files connected to a man whose crimes left a trail of devastation across continents. The files that contain the truth about who was involved, who helped, who looked the other way, and who may have done far worse. For years, people have asked the same question. Why haven't these records been released? Why are they sealed? Why do the people who claim to believe in transparency suddenly throw up walls the moment these documents come up? Survivors have begged for answers. Lawmakers demanded accountability. Investigators traced financial trails across oceans. And still silence. Until the amendment finally reached the floor. The files themselves aren't rumors. They're not gossip. They're official records, investigative documents, financial reports, suspicious activity logs, travel manifests, internal communications, plea agreements, immunity deals, and documents surrounding detention and that controversial unexplained death. Put together, they map out the web of a man who didn't operate alone. A network of people who enabled him, protected him, or directly benefited from his access to young girls. A network that, according to multiple reports, includes individuals who would prefer their names never surface again. These files could answer the question survivors have been asking for years. Who paid for what? Who flew where? Who signed off on questionable deals? Who communicated with whom behind closed doors? Who should have been charged but wasn't? And why were so many people allowed to slip quietly into the background when the case was supposedly about equal justice? One senator, along with a colleague from New Mexico, drafted a proposal that forced the issue: release the files. Not selectively. Not partially. Not someday. Now. With protections for victims and for ongoing investigations, but without protection for reputations. Without shielding anyone simply because their influence makes things uncomfortable. That's what made this amendment so powerful. It balanced transparency with safety, giving survivors the dignity they deserve while still demanding answers from the people who had spent years avoiding them. For a moment, it looked like the vote could swing toward sunlight. For a moment, it felt like maybe finally the country was ready to pull back the curtain. But then the count started. And as each no echoed through the chamber, the reality became painfully clear. A majority wanted those records sealed. They wanted the truth locked away. They wanted the public to know nothing more than they already do. 51 people chose secrecy, chose darkness, chose protection for the powerful over justice for the powerless. And if you listen closely to the survivors who watched that vote, they'll tell you exactly what it felt like: betrayal again. Many of these women were ignored, silenced, dismissed, and humiliated for years. They were told their stories didn't matter. Their voices didn't matter. Their pain didn't matter. And when the Senate had a chance to prove them wrong, the institution chose the same old pattern. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what's in those files. They're not just lists of names. They're detailed records of who traveled where and when. They show who funneled money through questionable channels, who signed checks to offshore accounts, who made deals behind closed doors, who accepted immunity, who negotiated sweetheart arrangements that kept them from facing any consequences. They're the missing puzzle pieces in a story that has never been fully told. And here's the part that makes people uneasy. Being in the files doesn't automatically mean wrongdoing. It could mean a brief association, a casual meeting, someone encountered during travel. But for others, those details could be the final thread tying them to actions they've tried for years to bury. Some documents reportedly contain handwritten notes, inside jokes, crude drawings, financial exchanges that raise far more questions than answers. One example making headlines involves a bizarre birthday book, filled with comments that feel almost like satire. Except nothing about this case is funny. A novelty check. A scribbled note about a woman described in deeply dehumanizing terms. Numbers written next to names that nobody has fully explained. Maybe humor between powerful friends. Maybe something else. But when the people involved refuse to clear it up, speculation spreads. There are also travel records showing flights to private islands, secluded properties, international destinations that investigators have linked to questionable activity. Forensic accountants who reviewed suspicious activity reports say the financial networks were far larger and more complex than the public was ever told. Offshore accounts, transfers disguised through charities, payments disguised as consulting fees. And over time, a pattern emerges, a network built to hide things, not reveal them. Senators who fought to release the files said the country deserved to know who did what and when. They argued that justice cannot exist if powerful names are protected while victims are left to pick up shattered pieces of their lives. They said transparency is the only way to finally put an end to the speculation that has fueled public distrust for over a decade. But others insisted the files stay sealed, citing procedural rules and investigative secrecy. Even though the proposal included protections. Even though law enforcement helped craft the exceptions. Even though victims themselves supported releasing the truth. And here's where the story becomes even more twisted. People on both sides of the political spectrum have said publicly, multiple times, that everything should be revealed. They've gone on camera claiming transparency is essential, that sunlight is the best disinfectant, that the public deserves answers. But when the moment arrived to actually act on those words, They walked away. It's one thing to say you support transparency. It's another to vote against it when it involves powerful figures who could face consequences. And that contradiction is why the vote hit so hard. It wasn't just about files. It was about trust. Trust in institutions, trust in leaders, trust in promises carved above a courthouse and repeated in every civics class. When the public sees secrecy used as a shield for elites, that trust evaporates. Survivors aren't asking for revenge. They're asking for clarity, for acknowledgement, for the truth about what happened to them and who enabled it. Many of them have spent years fighting against silence. Some have testified publicly. Some have filed lawsuits. Some have lost everything trying to hold a system accountable. And with one vote, the system told them again, your pain is inconvenient. Your truth is complicated. Your abusers are too connected. But the public noticed something else too. Transparency isn't just about justice for survivors. It's about preventing this kind of network from ever operating again. When files stay sealed, it tells future offenders that influence can erase consequences. When sunlight is blocked, it tells powerful people they can operate in the shadows. And that message is dangerous. Releasing the files, carefully redacted to protect victims, would allow investigators to follow leads that went cold. It would give journalists new timelines and connections to examine. It would allow civil lawsuits to move forward with evidence instead of guesswork. It would validate survivors who have been dismissed. And most importantly, it would show that the law does not bend for prestige or wealth. That's why advocates say the fight isn't over. The amendment can return. Public pressure can force leadership to bring it back. Lawmakers can be held accountable for how they voted. Survivor groups can push harder. Constituents can demand answers. Every time the story spreads, the pressure grows. Because in the end, this is about more than one man, more than one case, more than one network. It's about whether people with influence can hide behind silence forever. Whether the truth can stay buried simply because it's uncomfortable. Whether justice really means what it claims to mean. And if you're watching this, you play a role in whether this issue disappears again or finally comes into full view. Share the information. Talk about the vote. Support survivor-led organizations. Amplify the voices that have been ignored. Demand that your representatives choose light, not secrecy. The more people understand, the harder it becomes for institutions to hide the truth. If this helped you understand what really happened and why the fight for these files matters, make sure to subscribe for more deep dive breakdowns like this. Hit the like button so more people see the story, share this video to keep the pressure growing, and drop a comment with the transparency reforms you think Congress should pass next. The more we demand answers, the closer we get to real accountability, and to finally proving that equal justice under law isn't just carved in stone, but actually alive in practice.